On today's show, the weekly whip around is back. The Cavs have one of the biggest games, regular season games, in team history on Tuesdays. They look to stay unbeaten, taking on the Boston Celtics in NBA Cup action, plus matchups against New Orleans and Toronto to close out the week. We're going to talk about all three of those on today's Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? My name's Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like my new Substack, The Inside Shot, 92.3 Cleveland Magazine, and a number of other stops along the way. I want to say thank you to you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review as well. Plus, be a friend. Tell a friend about the Locked On Cavs podcast. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed as well. The show is also available on YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube right now, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button for me, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. A proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show, of course, is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll start with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On today's show, I've got John Karalis of Locked On Celtics. I've got Jake Madison of Locked On Pelicans and Sean Woodley of Locked On Raptors. The Cavs have a big week starting on Tuesday. Game against the Celtics, NBA Cup game against the defending champions, and the Cavs are looking to go to 16-0. This has obviously been an incredible start to the season. This has been something that I think a lot of fans should be over the moon about. It has been something that I believe has put a lot of the NBA and a lot of people that watch the NBA on notice. The Cavs are a team that I think are for real, and I think we're going to find out much more about just how for real they are on Tuesday night when they're in Boston, and I will give a little bit of a sneak preview. So with John, with Jake, with Sean, I always ask at the end of my little 10-minute sit-downs with these hosts, one question that is in common with the other ones. Today I'm asking, can the Cavs win the championship? I think that they can. I think you'll be interested to hear what people who cover other teams think as well. So like I said earlier, make sure you are liking, subscribe on YouTube, click that notification bell, be a friend, tell a friend about the podcast. Make sure you've got Cavs content. Make sure your friends have Cavs content. And without anything else, here is my conversation with John Karalis of Locked On Celtics. And joining me now to talk about one of the premier matchups in the NBA, really, I think all season, not just early season, I think all season, because it is the NBA Cup. No, I'm kidding, because the Cavs are 15-0 and they're taking on the defending NBA champion Boston Celtics, the guy who covers the Celtics better than anybody else. John Karalis joins me now, host of Locked On Celtics. Make sure you check out his podcast after you're done listening to this to get ready for that game. But John, the Cavs are going into Boston at 15-0. Boston is second in the East. They've had I think a strong start to the season that would be probably talked about a little bit more than if the Cavs were not 15-0. What have you liked that you've seen from the Celtics so far this year?
It's so interesting that your perspective is that, because I feel like even though they're 11-3, I've liked the fact that they're kind of revolutionizing the 3-point usage. They really are just pumping out 3-point attempts. They're changing how offense is run. But I also am focused more on, like, they're giving up a lot of points in the paint, and boy, they're giving up a lot of offensive rebounds and all of the things that are going wrong. Like, I'm more focused on, like, oh, they need to fix this, this, and this. And I'm not sitting there being like, wow, 11-3, they're actually on a better pace than they were last season, which they are. If they continue at this pace, they will have a better record than they did last season. I mean, they won't be the 82-0 Cleveland Cavaliers, but they'll be pretty good. And so, it is interesting to hear you be like, yeah, man, they're having a great start to the season, because I think a lot of people in Boston are like, yeah, it's fine. It's good. They seem like, we're also coming off a loss to the Atlanta Hawks earlier in the week, and a game against the Toronto Raptors that went into overtime. That was like, God, really? Overtime with the Raptors? So we're on a little bit of a kind of downward, like, yeah, they're okay type of feeling.
So let me ask you this then. What do you think needs to get fixed with this Boston team? You mentioned the defense. I know they have struggled defending the rim, really, and maybe part of that is Kristaps Porzingis allegedly will be playing basketball for the Celtics again at some point, and that could help. But what do you think does need to be fixed?
Yeah, that's the number one thing, right? They're just allowing a ton of layups. They're allowing putbacks. Their rotations aren't great. I just don't think they're as focused defensively, and I think it's a little bit of an effort thing, maybe just a little bit of a focus thing. They're not taking some of the lesser teams quite as seriously. Where last year they were finding those ways to win. I've been comparing this year's Cavs to last year's Celtics in that they had so much to prove. The Celtics last season had so much to prove that they were not even worried about, like, oh, this is the team that's in front. Who doesn't matter. We are going to prove X, Y, and Z. And the Cavs came into the season with a ton to prove as well. And it feels like they've been doing the same thing through 15 games. The Celtics have proven what they need to prove. Now they just need to work through some things, and the execution's just a little bit off. And when Porzingis gets back, things are going to change, because I just think his presence is going to keep guys like, if Darius Garland turns the corner on Tuesday night, he's looking at maybe Neemias Queta, and he says, okay, he's a big dude, but I'm going to challenge him. But you turn the corner against Kristaps Porzingis, and maybe you go, I'm going to swing this out. I got an open guy. I got Donovan in the corner. I'm just going to swing it over that way. So that might help change some of the things that the Celtics need to improve defensively. But definitely it's a defensive issue right now. And I think it's a malaise of sorts that they just have to get through.
I do think sometimes one of the most dangerous things, and sometimes we talk about, like, a team's dangerous in a good way. I think this is sort of in a bad way, but when you know exactly what you're capable of, and the Celtics very clearly do know exactly what they're capable of, having won a title, having won 60 plus games, you mentioned they have nothing to prove. I think that's exactly right, because you can look at an 11-3 start, and I see that on the surface. I think, oh, that's a good start. They're on a really good winning pace. And you dig a little bit deeper, as obviously you have, and maybe it isn't quite as impressive as that record does say. I am curious, though, because you've mentioned not taking the lesser teams maybe as seriously as they should. And I think most teams in the NBA that are good are guilty of that at times. Do you expect Tuesday night inside TD Garden to feel like more than a regular season game, because the Cavs, and I'm not talking about the NBA Cup, I know I mentioned that facetiously at the start, but because the Cavs come in undefeated, like, do you think that the Celtics are going to gear up for this one in a way they wouldn't a Tuesday night November game?
Yeah, well, this is also an NBA belt game. I don't know if you follow my NBA
It
belt.
is an NBA belt game. Yes, I did want to get to that.
That is the most important aspect of this game to me. I do think they're going to get up for it. And, they've had a couple of days off. I think they've had, like I said, the Toronto game, they're coming off of that win. But, again, overtime against the Raptors, some of the film is going to look very bad. And, on top of it, you've got Donovan Mitchell and Jaylen Brown are like best friends, and there's going to be a little bit of a friendly rivalry there. And there's the playoff matchups from last season that both teams are going to, that's going to kind of come up a little bit. So I do think the Celtics are going to gear up and probably execute a little bit better than we've seen. We saw them execute great on opening night against the New York Knicks, and that's one of their challengers in the East. The Cavs are another challenger in the East. And even if people maybe underrated the Cavs coming into the season, it's very obvious now that a couple of these other challengers are not so much anymore. And the Cavs have ascended to be like, okay, this could be an Eastern Conference Finals matchup. So let's go out there and play and show them what we got.
Yeah, I do think that in the East is not going to, at least in my opinion, look the same way it does right now all season long. I don't expect Philadelphia to be 14th, even though I haven't been impressed with them, and the big guy never wants to play, but I don't expect them to be 14th either. But I do think right now, as we look at these teams, it's hard for me to see very many outcomes, because where these two teams don't meet in the conference finals. At this point, I would be fairly stunned if they're not the 1 and 2 seed in some order in the conference, just with where they're at record-wise compared to the rest. And I've not yet been, and listen, it is early. Maybe give New York time and they look much better, but I have a lot of questions about what they're going to look like defensively. I don't know how many paths there are that don't include these two teams in the conference finals at the end in May.
Yeah, it's looking much more likely. And look, I don't want to look at standings necessarily, but this start from Cleveland and from the Celtics, because we know what the Celtics are and we kind of trust them to continue, even if they struggle through some games, figure out and win more often than not. The Bucks, I mean, I don't even know what to make of the Bucks anymore, other than they might not be a threat at all.
Right.
The Sixers, the Bucks are 10 games out. The Sixers are 11 and a half games out. That's a lot to make up, considering how bad they look now and how good these teams at the top look. And I don't know that Cleveland, I mean, knock on wood, barring any injury, like, is Cleveland going to go on a prolonged losing streak? I mean, maybe there's one. Maybe there's a 4-gamer in there somewhere. But the way they look and the way they are, I think, mentally focused, I don't see them losing more than like 2 or 3 in a row here or there. Like the Celtics last season, never lost more than 2 in a row. So if they have that kind of season, maybe they end up close to 60 wins, more than 60 wins. So they've already put enough room between them where dropping down to 3rd or 4th is going to take some, like the Cavs are going to have to be complicit in a drop that deep. The Celtics are going to have to be complicit if they drop that deep, because these other teams have already put so much distance between the two because of how much they're struggling to start the season. So yeah, I think we're already looking at top 2, at worst top 3 seeds in the East.
So I will get you out of here on this, because every week on my Whip Around show, what I do is, for the guests I have on, I ask the same question. Sometimes it can pertain to their team. Sometimes it pertains to the Cavs. But with the Cavs start, the question I'm asking, I think it's very appropriate with this game on Tuesday night. Do you believe that the Cavaliers are capable of winning the NBA Finals this upcoming spring?
Capable? Sure. I still have questions. Because the regular season and the playoffs are different. I do have questions about health, certainly, considering the track record and knowing that if it's going to be a Boston and Cleveland kind of, crash course, I do know that the Celtics have places that they can attack in ways, strategies that have worked against Cleveland in the past. And as good as Cleveland is, and I'm not saying like I expect another series like last season, I look at Celtics matchups versus a Cleveland matchup. I still put Boston ahead of Cleveland in a 7-game series, because there are more places for Boston to attack Cleveland than there are for Cleveland to attack Boston. And I just think that always wins out in a playoff series. But that doesn't mean guaranteed. That doesn't mean they won't, that the Cavs won't. So are they? I think they are capable, but I still put the Celtics ahead of them as far as if I'm picking who's going to make it there. I still have Boston as number 1.
Yeah, I don't think that's an unpopular take. I think that's a very fair and reasoned take. If you're looking for more on the Boston Celtics before what is the game of the NBA season so far, who knows? Could be the game of the entire NBA season. Check out John at Locked On Celtics. He's got you covered. He covers that team better than anybody else. John, thanks so much for taking the time to jump on Locked On Cavs today.
Appreciate it, Danny. Thank you.
Today's show is brought to you by BetterHelp. November is a month where we give thanks for a lot of things. Thanksgiving is coming up, and there are people in our lives, there are things in our lives that we are thankful for. I know I'm certainly thankful for my fiance. I'm thankful for my family. I'm thankful for, the job that I get to do every single day. But there are some things that we're thankful for that we don't necessarily have the opportunity to shout out. And that should be ourselves. We should be grateful for ourselves. And sometimes it can be difficult to remind ourselves that we are trying our best each and every day to make sense of everything and anything in this crazy world. And that's not an easy thing. So this should serve really as a reminder to send some thanks to the people in your life like some of the ones that I just mentioned, but include yourself when you do that as well. And a great way to do that is by using therapy. Utilizing therapy can really help to make sure that you are being grateful to yourself, because that is something that's really important. If you are thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedonnba today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonnba, LOCKEDONNBA to get 10% off your first month. Again, that's betterhelp.com/lockedonnba. And joining me now, Jake Madison, host of the Locked On Pelicans podcast. Things have not gone according to plan for the New Orleans Pelicans. I think it's fair to say, as they enter this week with a record of 4-10, I believe there are more injuries in New Orleans, believe it or not, since the last time Jake was on the podcast. Jake, what exactly has gone wrong in New Orleans?
Look, it's injuries, right? When you're missing this many guys that are this important to the team, Zion Williamson, CJ McCollum, DeJounte Murray, who is their big offseason acquisition. So not only do you not have DeJounte, you don't have the depth you traded away for him, including Dyson Daniels, who's looked really good on defense. No Herb Jones. They've missed Trey Murphy for a lot of the season. Jordan Hawkins is out now. It ends up being something like 6 of your top 7 guys. So you're left with Brandon Ingram and a bunch of two-way players. Look, the expectation shouldn't be that you're going to win games at that point. It's just try and be competitive. And to their credit, New Orleans has done that. But the injuries are just brutal for this team.
So is there hope that sometime soon this team's going to be a healthier version of itself? I know when the Cavs saw the Pelicans last time, Trey Murphy was not available. I know he's since been back. There's been no DeJounte Murray. There's been no CJ McCollum. Zion Williamson did play in that game. I think that actually might have been the last game he played in. Who is expected back? Are we going to see a healthier version of this team when the Cavs play on Wednesday night? Is there hope on the way, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, there's some. CJ McCollum's the next guy that's going to be back for this team. I don't think it'll be against the Cavaliers, but we're in the realm of where that could happen. But I still think they're going to delay that a little bit longer as he works his way back from that abductor injury. It's just been brutal with that. So CJ's coming back. The next guy after that should be Herb Jones. Then they'll get DeJounte Murray. And then it's Zion Williamson and Jose Alvarado are going to be out a little bit longer with those hamstring injuries that each have. But there are some players coming back for New Orleans. The question, especially in the West, though, is it like too little too late?
Right. It gets early really fast, especially in that conference. And I think this would probably be a different conversation if the Pelicans were in the Eastern Conference, just considering how the landscape of the East looks compared to the West with records. But how late is it already? Is this a team that should still have trying to win this season in its best interests? Or are we thinking about, this just might be the season from hell. This might be a lost season. And it happens to somebody, it feels like every year in the NBA, and maybe it's New Orleans this year.
Right, like it has shades of Memphis last year with John Morant out for the suspension and then the injury and then all the other injuries they had. And at a certain point, you saw them just be like, you know what? Nope, like we're good. We're going to be bad. They ended up with the top pick getting Zach Edey, who should make an impact for him. New Orleans is 2.5 games back when we're recording this on Sunday as, from the 10th seed. So from the play-in tournament, it's not like this is like 6 games, 8 games or something like that. If you were at that point, I'd say like, yeah, they should shut it down. And I think there's a good argument to be made for shutting it down. But then you look at their salary cap situation, and they're already in the tax this year. And if they decide they're going to shut it down, look, that means you're trading probably CJ McCollum in a salary dump situation then, or Brandon Ingram too, or trading CJ and then letting Ingram walk after the offseason. That's not an ideal situation. That's probably going to mean people get fired in New Orleans, whether it's David Griffin, whether it's head coach Willie Green. No one wants to lose their job, right? So they're not going to make moves that kind of put themselves in that situation, I think. So, I think there's a strong argument to be made that, they should shut it down and that they should start trying to tank in a good draft class. But the reality is they probably won't, at least until much later in the year.
So with all those guys injured, I know things haven't gone well, but there do have to be some bright spots for this team. There have to be bright spots on every team. What have you learned, or what have been things that have been, I guess, pleasantly surprising about watching this Pelicans team while 90% of the roster is on the shelf?
Yeah, look, there's a couple of things, right? And you even saw it in that first game between these two teams, right? Like, they're still really undermanned. They had Zion, they had Ingram. Zion left the game for a little while, came back and played relatively well, I thought. But they just don't have the talent here. But what you see from them is they are competitive. They stay in the game until about the fourth quarter, and then they just run out of steam. And, when I was at the game on Saturday night against the Lakers, they had a lineup that was all three of their two-way guys. Jalen Noel, who was signed after the season started, and Javonte Green, who's on a vet minimum and has been injured for his whole career. And that lineup tried hard. They played well, and that's all you can really ask for, right? And so you see like the competitive spirit of this team, which will take you a pretty far way. They just don't have guys that are capable of playing 30 to 35 minutes per game. So when you hit the fourth quarter and these guys have kind of used up all of their good minutes, all of a sudden the team ends up losing by 10 or 20 points, but it actually doesn't show how kind of close the game was for the majority of it. There's something to be said for that, right? Like, guys just not quitting and things like that and going out and competing, I think, is a really important thing. Brandon Boston Jr. has been a little bit of a bright spot for New Orleans, coming in basically right before the season started on a two-way deal. He's been starting. He's kind of been playing point guard a little bit for him at times. He's done really well. Brandon Ingram has seemed to have found his rhythm, even if I don't love the play style the past couple of games too, with back-to-back 30-point games. With that competitiveness, if you get one player back, I think you can maybe start to win some games. It might not get you back right into the thick of things, but better than losing, I'd say. And if you look at it from a strategic standpoint, and it'll be interesting going against the Cavaliers here, is the Pelicans have really attacked the offensive glass. They realize they have some pretty good offensive rebounders. They're really fighting for those second chance points, and they did well against the Denver Nuggets with that. They did well in the loss to OKC. They did well against the Lakers with that. It'll be interesting to see how that strategy works against the Cavaliers, who are a very good defensive rebounding team. But New Orleans, for their struggles in the half court, have realized, let's attack the offensive boards and get some of those easy putbacks, and it's kept them in some of these games.
Well, it always is, as you're watching a team that is either young or severely injured. It's fun being able to see the ways that they can figure out to stay competitive, or they can figure out a way to find edges. And I think that kind of speaks to what you have to do when you're in the situation the Pelicans are in. I do want to shift the focus a little bit to the Cavs, because this is, I believe, the first Western Conference team that the Cavs will see two times. So they won't see New Orleans again after this game on Wednesday night, which is a little bit of a bummer, but that's how the schedule shakes out. What I'm very curious to hear from the people that I talk to around the league that cover other teams, that I've started to ask because of the great start the Cavs have obviously gotten off to. After seeing the Cavs up close, after seeing what they've done against other teams, do you believe that this Cavs team is one that's capable of winning the title this year?
Yeah, I'd say they're in the running, right? Like, despite their record and, despite the win over the Celtics, I'm probably not putting them above that. But the way I kind of define a title contender is, can you make the conference finals? Can you be one of the final four teams in the NBA? And when you look at Cleveland and everything they're doing well, that offense is phenomenal. They're really good defensively too. The big men are working in a way that you didn't quite see last year, and shows what coaching can do when you come in with new ideas and things like that. Their weaknesses are, in my opinion, they rely on a little more mid-range than I think I'd like. They don't get to the free throw line nearly as much as they should. But if you're making your shots and other things like that can kind of counterbalance that, I think. And they're trending upwards in terms of three-point shooting, which in a 7-game series against Boston is going to be something you're going to need. And early in the season, I was like, are they going to shoot enough threes to be able to win the math battle when it comes to that? But you've seen them improve in that, I think. Every single game, they're taking a few more, and they're trending upwards in that direction. I think when you look at that, they're really good on the defensive glass, which means you're going to eliminate a lot of those second chance points. This is a team I like. I think they have, the second or third best net rating in the league right now. And when you kind of look at that, let me pull that up and take a look, right? Like, they're a plus 12 in net rating per Basketball Reference. As long as you're above 6, you have a chance to be a Final Four team. So plus 12 is pretty good so far.
Yes, and we will see what they look like in their second matchup with the Pelicans on Wednesday. It is the second night of a back-to-back for the Cavs after they're in Boston on Tuesday night for an NBA Cup game. If you want to hear more about the Pelicans, about Northeast Ohio native CJ McCollum as he gets close to his return, check out Jake at Locked On Pelicans. Does a great job there. Has everything that you need to get ready for the Pelicans coming to Cleveland for their only visit of the year. Jake, thanks so much for doing this.
Of course. Thanks for having me on, man.
Today's show also brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle all the action you can handle with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. That doesn't sound too difficult, right? Like if you would put $5 on the Cavs every single game so far in the regular season, you'd be doing pretty well. And if you're a new customer, you would have won. Maybe not always against the spread, most of the time against the spread. Maybe not always, though. But if you would have taken them on the money line, you would have won. And if you're a new customer, you would have $150 back in bonus bets. That's with FanDuel. And the FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, all the sports going on right now, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Where's that page? That page is in the FanDuel Sportsbook app and FanDuel.com. So join FanDuel.com today. That's FanDuel.com to join today. You will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And now we bring in Sean Woodley. We haven't caught up with Sean since just before the season when the Cavs took on the Toronto Raptors to open up the season in what feels like so long ago. And in Toronto, a lot of things have maybe not gone according to plan, or maybe they have gone according to plan. I don't know exactly what the plan is for the Toronto Raptors, but they sit at the bottom of the Eastern Conference as we record this very late on Sunday night. That, of course, could change throughout the week before the Cavs take on the Raptors next Sunday to close out their week. Sean, thanks for doing this. What exactly has gone wrong this year for the Raptors?
Health, man. It's been a rough go with their two most important creators, Scotty Barnes and Emmanuel Quickley. We saw Quickley get hurt in that opening night game against the Cavs. He went down. He missed 8 games after that, came back for 2 games, and then has a partially torn UCL in his left elbow, a baseball injury. Very cool. Very awesome. So, yeah, he's out. He's got like a sleeve on. He's not using his left arm right now. He's going to be out quite a while, it seems. And then Scotty Barnes in the 4th game of the season, I think it was, took an elbow from Nikola Jokic. Not a man I'd want to take an elbow from, frankly. No. And he broke his orbital bone. And so, yeah, he's been out, and it's just been really tough to stitch together lineups that can kind of carry. I mean, the Raptors starters have been kind of shockingly okay, like a very slight positive with Davion Mitchell, Ochai Agbaji, Grady Dick, RJ Barrett, and Jakob Poeltl out on the floor together. It's after you get into the bench where there's a whole lot of rookies. There's a whole lot of Chris Boucher where he's very feast or famine. You know, sometimes he'll have a crazy heater. Sometimes he'll totally play you out of the game. It's just been rocky to kind of stretch together enough minutes over the course of 48 that are sort of workable and tenable. And that is where things have really fallen apart. That said, like, they've been a pretty fun team. Like, they've been in games. They've been, you know, kind of taking it down to the wire. They lose on a buzzer beater to the Celtics on Saturday. They lose in a 2-possession game to the Pistons on Friday. Had a lot of games like that over the course of the season. They're really rarely getting blown out. And if they are getting blown out, it's kind of like a losing steam in the 4th quarter type of thing. They've not really come out and gotten the brakes beaten off of them from Jump Street, really in any game since that opener against the Cavaliers. But yeah, just not enough health, not enough guys who can create shots down the stretch. And the result is the bottom of the Eastern Conference standings, and already kind of looking at Cooper Flag highlights from college to see, all right, does this guy fit here? Yeah, it's great times over here.
Well, there are worse things than being a fun bad team. Being a not fun bad team certainly would be one of them. I do want to get to that in a second, but you mentioned health as being the biggest culprit for the Raptors being where they're at in the standings. You mentioned Quickley, you mentioned Scotty Barnes. Quickley, it sounds like with that sleeve, you know, I wouldn't expect him to play for a while. I wouldn't expect him to pitch for much longer if the Blue Jays need any help. But what's the expectation for Barnes' return to the court? It's been about 3 weeks, if I'm not mistaken. Is there any chance that he's back in the lineup for Toronto when they're in Cleveland on Sunday?
I think there's a chance. He's wearing a mask. He was at practice this week. We saw him, you know, on Tuesday, I think it was a Raptors practice. Maybe, Thursday. It was Thursday. We saw him, you know, getting some work in. He had a mask on. which was the first we've really seen of him. They were on the road before that, so we're not really quite sure what he was doing while they were out on the road for a couple of weeks. But it was good to see him back and just kind of doing stuff on the floor, mask and all. He's still, like, if you see his eye, it still looks like a demon has possessed it. It's kind of messed up. There's like ruptured blood vessels or whatever going on in there. Not exactly sure. I'm kind of using the will Scottie be back gauge. I'm just looking at his eye and like how the red is dissipating over the course of time, and that's getting us closer to return, I think. So we'll see. There's a chance. I think we'll probably know more on Thursday. Coach Darko Rajakovic mentioned, we'll probably have an update on Scottie, Kelly Olynyk, Bruce Brown in about a week. So that would bring us to Thursday, a couple days ahead of this game against the Cavs. I would bet against it, but I don't think it's out of the question that we see Scottie Barnes against Cleveland, which would be a welcome sight for us here in Toronto to see the lead creator on this team back and playing. And, I'm not sure how much it would change the line or anything like that for the game against the Cavs, because the Cavs are clearly very, very good and the Raptors are not so much. But certainly any closer they can get to getting some health and just sort of reasonable lineups where they can actually gather some real information on these guys that they have. The whole point of this season was, hey, let's see what we got. Throw them out there. We've not really gotten to see what they got because no one's been around. And so hopefully the walking wounded can start making their way back this week. But yeah, I'd probably put it like 75-25 that he doesn't play. There's a chance we see him though.
Right. I do think a sort of a theme for the Cavs this week, other than their game against the Celtics on Tuesday, is they're playing the walking wounded. They have the Pelicans on Wednesday. The Raptors, as you've mentioned, on Sunday. Everybody seems to be out of the lineup. That is important for the most part. I know they still have some key guys playing, mainly RJ Barrett, but that does lead me to talking about this team being sort of a fun version of a bad team. Sean, what sort of bright spots have you seen with the Raptors while they've had to traverse through this time without Scottie Barnes, without Quickly, without just some of their very key players?
Yeah, I think there have been a few things, right? Number one, Grady Dick, I feel like, has been maybe the most talked about nationally guy who's been really interesting for the Raptors. He's had a couple of rough games here, the last couple. I think it's mostly due to he's being asked to do like everything right now for this offense. When he's on the floor, the Raptors offense tends to function pretty well. When he's not, there's just not enough shooting, not enough spacing, not enough, gravity off the ball to really make things spacious enough for it to be sensible. But Grady Dick already, like you can see, the scouting report has completely sold out to stop Grady Dick. Teams are terrified of him because he's banging threes from above the break. He's walking into mid-range jumpers. He's getting to the rim a ton. He's getting to the line a ton lately as well. It seems like he's setting a career high each week. It's been a really fun thing to watch him. He's averaging nearly 20 points a game in his second season after looking for stretches last year, like maybe the worst rotation player in the NBA in the first half of his rookie year. It's been quite a glow up for Grady Dick so far this year. Again, I think he is very much going to benefit from Scottie Barnes and the rest hopefully coming back soon, because he is being asked to do just so much. But yeah, he has been the clear bright spot. And a couple other ones. I mean, RJ Barrett, his efficiency is kind of cratered because he too is being asked to do too much right now. But I do think his playmaking stuff has been pretty fantastic. S. Barry from The Athletic shared a stat today. He is the number one player in terms of pick and roll ball handler efficiency in basketball. 1.21 points per possession as a pick and roll ball handler. He has been dynamic. Him and Jakob Poeltl have been killing it in the two-man game. He's being asked to do too much again. Like his shot diet's very difficult right now. That'll ease off once Quickly and Barnes are back as well. But he's been a great story. And then Ochai Abaji's been like kind of a stunner. Former Cavs draft pick, obviously.
Old
really
friend.
Struggled. Yeah, exactly. Really struggled with the Jazz and really was awful last season after the Raptors traded for him. Looked like he was just going to be a guy that came and went out the door who didn't really offer much, but he's been like extremely good. He's shooting in the mid 40s from three. He can't seem to miss a two at the rim to save his life, offering really stout defense at the 2 and the 3, even guarded Giannis pretty credibly last week. Those are the three guys who I think have really taken the bull by the horns with the opportunity that's been given them in the Raptors starting five and have been very encouraging. And then on the whole, like they're just close in games, right? They're a try-hard team. They give a damn. They're maybe not the most talented, but you got Davion Mitchell and Jamal Shed harassing ball handlers like maniacs. They rotate hard. They rebound like maniacs, especially on the offensive end. Like they just do try hard stuff that gets you by, at least in the sort of middle parts of games against good teams until the good teams put you away late. But that's been kind of the read on the Raptors, right? Is it no one's mad about what's going on. Everyone's just kind of like, yeah, the injuries, it's the situation they're in. They're not getting blown out. They're having fun games. And a few guys are making strides that I think are only going to sort of make more sense and be more sustainable once the best guys on this team are back and everyone kind of falls back into their place in the hierarchy.
Right. And sometimes the best thing for young guys that are looking to find what their role truly is or find their footing in the NBA can be, a prolonged period where they have increased responsibility, where their usage is probably higher than it should be, because I do think that is something that helps them learn what type of player they should be, where their spots are on the floor, things like that. So that I do think can be looked at as a positive when the Raptors go through a stretch like they are right now. Last thing that I want to ask, and this is the question I've been asking everybody that's been on before you on today's show. Do you, and this will be the second time that you see the Cavaliers after opening night, the Cavs were in Toronto. Now this is the second time they're facing the Raptors. Do you believe the Cavs are capable of winning the NBA championship this year?
I really want to say I do, because I'm a Celtics hater through and through. I think the Celtics style of play is joyless and soulless, and frankly should be considered a crime against basketball. Oh, cool. Drive, kick, another three. Oh, cool. Another three. Like, it's boring. It's like, have some style, have some flair. The Cavs have that. I think styles make fights. I think the way the Cavs play is unique and fun, and their roster construction is bizarre. And I love bizarre roster constructions. And I do think that, if the Celtics don't have Kristaps Porzingis, they're totally gettable. Like, with Kristaps, they're pretty tough to beat. Obviously, he fixes their biggest problem, which right now is just kind of like stopping teams at the rim. He obviously is a big part of that. But does anyone trust Kristaps Porzingis to be healthy all through the playoffs? Does anyone trust anybody to be healthy all through the playoffs? I think, really, for me, in this modern era of parity, if you're one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the league, if you can make a conference finals, you can totally win a championship, because weird stuff happens, injuries take place, and all you got to do is be in a spot where you can take advantage. I think the Cavs are going to be in that spot. I think they're clearly one of the 2 best teams in a very bad Eastern Conference. They're probably going to have a pretty plum walk to the conference finals. And if you meet the Celtics there in late May, they have a chance to beat them, just because injuries are such a big part of the reality for everybody. The same thing goes for the Cavs too. But yeah, I don't think the Celtics are some sort of unbeatable juggernaut. Their 3-point shooting does lend itself to variance. And if you're a team that can score at the rim, we saw with the Raptors on Saturday night, the Raptors took 23 threes in their game against Boston. Boston made 21, but because the Raptors simply just rained a barrage of 2s on their heads from at the rim, they were able to be close enough that they needed a Jason Tatum end of game heave to win the game. It was a total prayer. Garbage shot, bad shot. Paul George would hate it.
And he traveled before it, according to the last 2-minute report. He did travel
before. You're right. Yeah. Don't worry about Davion Mitchell fouling Jaylen Brown 2 seconds before that shot went up. It doesn't matter. Yeah. We only pick out the things that make us mad from the last 2-minute report. But yeah, exactly. I think because of the variance that the Celtics bring with their really dumb equation, I think the Cavs have a chance for sure. And man, oh man, would I love to see it.
Well, I think a lot of Cavs fans like what you have to say as far as that goes. If you want to learn more about the Toronto Raptors, get ready for the Cavs match up with them next Sunday at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. Give Sean's podcast, Locked On Raptors, a listen. He covers the team every day, does a great job of doing that. Sean, thanks so much for taking the time to do this, man.
Anytime, man.
Thank you again for making today's Locked On Cavs your first listen today. Thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. Like I said earlier, you can find the show anywhere you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Be sure to drop us a 5-star rating, leave us a nice review, be a friend, tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you've got Locked On Cavs as a subscription. Make sure your friend subscribes to Locked On Cavs as well. Also, if you're watching a show on YouTube, do me a favor right now. Hit that thumbs up button for me, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. I'll be back tomorrow talking about how the Cavs can beat the Boston Celtics and move to 16-0. I'll talk to you then.